Good morning. I'm Herb Bedford. I'm on the Board of Trustees, and I have announcements this morning. Today, the special presentation that was planned on Walking St. Olaf's Way with Rod Kemkes has been postponed. Rod's continued to test positive for COVID, so he's not here today. We have things coming up on Tuesday from 4:45 to 6 p.m. The Super Supper at Eagle Harbor Congregational Church, where Cedars does that in partnership with Kol Shalom, offering super suppers on the last Tuesday of each month. On Wednesday is the third meeting of the Elder Spiritual Study Group, which is exploring and embracing the spiritual gifts of aging. Our Faith Formation Director, Archer Phillips, is going to be busy on Friday and Saturday. On Friday night, he's hosting an all-games night at the Cedars Center from 6 to 7 p.m. for a night of family games. And on Saturday at the Cedars Center from 2 to 4 p.m., he's going to have everything set up for a Halloween all-ages crafts projects. You can make projects to take home, and there will also be a special activity decorating a larger item that can be used in our October 30th All Souls Day service. And remember, next Sunday is All Souls Day. So the service on October 30th, you're encouraged to bring pictures of your departed loved ones to place on the communal table during the prelude. Thank you.
Thanks, Herb. My name's Mike Cox, and I am today having a service with my friends here, and I want to thank them. John Kidd is going to be doing the sermon today. Sandy Spears very nicely kind of came in at the last minute. Penny Brewer is going to be here, but she had some family emergency, so she wouldn't, so Sandy stepped in. And of course, you know the last person, I don't even have to tell her, but Fran Corton, if you don't know her. So thank you, Fran. And Peter, it's always good you grace us with your music. Really appreciate that. And thanks everybody for setting up here. So the title for the day's service is Sharing Our Call to Climate Action. And so what you're going to do, what you're going to hear is a number of John and Sandy are going to talk about their kind of their journey with climate change and then specific actions they're doing. And then what we're going to do is we're going to break up into small groups and have a discussion. And we're going to ask everybody, think about what you feel called to do to address climate change. And Archer's going to take the little ones and have a special little thing for them. So at that point, Archer is going to take over. So that's how the service is going to work. But before we start, let's pause to acknowledge that members of our congregation occupy the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of Coast Salish tribes. We are grateful guests on these lands and affirm Indigenous sovereignty with both past and present. This acknowledgement does not substitute for the need to build authentic relationships with modern-day members of these tribes and to learn about their living culture and history. Cedars is committed to being a welcoming and inclusive community. In all the beauty of languages, cultures, and skin tones that come together in your uniqueness, we welcome you. In all the way you experience and express gender, in the beauty of who and how you love, we welcome you. With all the religious and ethical traditions that inform your spiritual life, we welcome you. You're invited to join us today and always with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. So John's going to lead us in our first hymn today. It's number 21. It's in, I'm colorblind. Archer, what's the color of the big book? Gray. It's green. Gray. So if you put a mask on if you're going to sing, and Peter will lead us in that, and then Sandy Spears will have a reflection. And if they need a mask, David has some in the back.
Raise your hand, I'll be bringing one to you. So, hymn 21 in your gray hymnal, and we are going to sing this hymn through 4 verses.
Hi, I want to share with you my climate journey. I was born, raised in a conservative family and community and church, and we never talked about environmental issues. The only time it was ever referenced was in sort of a negative sense, because the locals were in agribusiness and felt like the environmentalists were making it harder for them. So it was never talked about, and so I always just went along. I mean, that was the culture I was raised in, and that's the way it was, and the environmental stuff was just, whatever. And we talked a lot about business, and 2000, as late as that, I was really upset with Al Gore for trying to mess with the election outcome. But I've always loved the outdoors, and I loved hiking and things like that. So 2002, I decided, because I'm a huge nerd, to take a class to become a master naturalist at the Houston Arboretum. So I got my nerd self down there each week, and I got my yellow highlighter out. I was so excited, and I was learning everything. Week 6, this PhD from NASA got up. She was a speaker that week, and she started talking about climate change. And I thought, first of all, you're ruining my fun activity. And second of all, I've never heard anyone ever talk about this before. It really isn't really that big of a deal. The course ended, but her words continued to haunt me. So I set out to try to prove to myself that she was wrong, because if she was, then I don't have that stress of knowing about climate change. So I did a lot of research, and I thought, it's just groupthink. This is what she thinks at NASA, although NASA's pretty respectable. But I thought, no, climate literature, I found out, was coming in from around the world. Okay, and then I kept researching. I thought, surely people taking temperature records around the world are not all in a conspiracy together. And I was just kind of looking for a way out of this, and I kept researching, and I thought, what is scientific method? Maybe that's just like a whatever. So I took a course online at UC San Diego with a bunch of climate and political scientists. And they covered a lot of very sophisticated material. I was really impressed. And they talked about the scientific method, and how before there was mysticism and superstition, and now we have scientific method. But not only do we have that, but we have satellite imagery to show the melting of the Arctic and things over time. And we have supercomputers, so we can synthesize data in a way that we've never been able to before. So I thought, wow, that's pretty powerful. And life was going on, and we have our real jobs and life, and no one I knew was talking about it. And in fact, I got this feeling they thought I was a little odd for worrying about this whatever. So I was like, why? So one day I'm somewhere, and the Fox News was on, and they said, the former National Academy of Science member says climate change is a hoax. I thought, yay, finally. I went away out, yay. I knew there had to be a counter argument to this. And so, on the news channel, the only thing they talked about was what this one man had done. He'd put out a survey, and thousands of scientists had signed it, agreeing with him that it wasn't true. So I wanted that to be true, but of course I'm going to do my research. And all the signatures, it wasn't replicable like scientific method. It wasn't, there was no way to contact who had signed this. Spice Girls' names were on there, and some characters from the TV show MASH. And then the National Academy of Science came out and said the man had used their letterhead without permission to send this out. And we as a scientific community, NASA, it is true. I mean, they were furious. And I thought, wow, this is really bad. They lied, and this is the best they have to counter? Is this it? I mean, the level of sophistication from what else I was reading was like Einstein, and this was like kindergarten. And so that was a big pivotal moment for me in a lot of ways. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go to our church, and We talk about reducing suffering. It's a Presbyterian church. I'm going to get there, and the scientists say we can turn around. Let's do it, because that's what we talk about at church. Now, our church, like historically, growing up and where we were in Houston, we normally don't talk about things in the commons. People would give casseroles to each other, super amazingly supportive when our daughter was really ill. But we never talked about voting or air quality or things in the commons. It was like business and that. And so I wasn't really used to anything but that myself in terms of volunteerism. But by that point, I had taken a class, was trained as climate reality presenter through Al Gore, and I loved him. He was so amazing at the conference. And I presented it to the team, and I said, I'd like to get up in front of the church like everyone else does. I've been coming here for 20 years and do a minute for mission. Well, the former Exxon executive said, no, you may not. We don't want you to talk about that. And I said, wow, okay. All right, I won't, but I went to some other senior women who were really involved, and I said, can we set up a group and talk about it? And can I show you my climate reality presentation? And they said no. And they defriended me on social media. And I mean, some of you don't know me, but I'm not a kind of combative person. I'm pretty low-key. So that was another pivotal moment, and I thought, well, I'm just going to set out on my own. This is like very much a Christian value, and I'm going to keep working on this by myself. I don't know of anyone that's engaged in this. And I've been reading a bunch of Bill McKibben books and a bunch of other stuff, and I saw that he was doing a march in New York City, and so I went there with my daughter, who went on to get a degree in this, and we marched around, and I saw all these other people who were like me. They weren't scientists. I thought I couldn't say anything because I didn't work at the Department of Energy or something, but they were all normal people, and they were able to engage. And I could tell by the signs and everything else that they were engaging in a grassroots way, and I that was new to me. I didn't know you really could do it like that. So I went back to Houston, and I made a big sign, and I held it above the major freeway, and I sat there for hours, 2 days in a row. And the second day, it wasn't in a row, but the second day, a friend of mine who was the humor columnist at the Chronicle came and covered me. And then Climate People contacted me, and then I started a group there and stuff. So that was my journey, and I'm not going to talk about the things that I started doing to help with climate change, because that's going to be covered later with other people here and in our groups, and Mike and Fran have a group that really supports specific actions you can take. But I want to close with this 2 frames that I use, because I feel like in terms of actions, there's all these different actions, and for me, I need a frame. And one of my frames is, how as an individual can I engage in the commons to help? I mean, you guys already know all this stuff, but this is my frame for me. You can engage through, as an individual, and they all overlap, through nonprofits engaging with corporations to ask them to help signing petitions. You can engage on policy level by contacting people and a bunch of stuff, and through nonprofits, and through individual actions. And I put my actions in those 4 buckets. And then the sub-bucket for individual actions is I look at the pie chart for greenhouse gas emissions, the sectors, and I try to do something in every sector, like electricity or transportation or land use or whatever. So it helps me organize it in my head a little bit better. So, thank you for letting me talk. And it's not too late. We can turn this around if more people engage. And there's some really wonderful stuff, like the Inflation Reduction Act that went through that's happening. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Man, you've come a long ways, I have to say. God, I've never heard that story. That's a pretty good one. Let's see, what could be I couldn't top that. So, and Sandy's modest. She's very engaged in the climate here and in Texas and all over the place. So she's very modest on the action she's taken. So, now I'm going to light the chalice. So, let's see. Okay, I haven't done this for a while. So please repeat after with me as we do our affirmation. As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because we are one family, to take good care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness because that is how we all become the best that we can be. So our next hymn, number 1073 in the Blue Book.
Yes.
Blue Book?
Blue Book.
Okay.
Teal. It's a blue of some sort. $10.72. Oh, 1073 in the teal hymnal. Peter, if you could give us a little intro. The earth is our mother. We must take care of her. The earth is our mother. We must take care of
Thank you, Archer. So, this is a time of the service where, for the collection, today we selected, the Social Justice Committee selected Earth Justice as the group we're going to do a special collection for today. And they have a really cool motto, I think. Earth Justice on their website, and they say, because the earth needs a good lawyer. Which I thought was that was catchy to me. Definitely worth at least $10, $20, I think. So, but who is Earth Justice? Well, Earth Justice does a lot of things around the country, specifically here in the Northwest. They help and work with the tribes to protect their natural and cultural resources, but they also do a lot of work on climate change, both in trying to ensure that that our ocean and forest ecosystems are intact. So they do a lot of good work. So if you would like to receive a tax Deduction for your donation, please write a check payable to Cedars UU Church with Earth Justice in the memo line down below, and place it in the basket. If you want, you can also send a check to Cedars office by October 30th. So what we're going to do now, the ushers are going to go around, and Peter will play some music for us as we do the offering. So thank you very much. Oh, over there. Oh, God, the peanut gallery. Thank you. Okay, now we got our guy, John Kidd. I don't know if many of you know John. He's a lawyer by training, but he does a lot of other amazing things. And the reason I asked him here today is because for me, whenever I hear John talk, I'm going, why don't I think of that stuff? You know, it's one of these things where you go, gosh, I'm not a very deep thinker, but John is, and he's really a joy to listen to, and he's an amazing activist on climate change, on a lot of things. I'm not going to cover those, but just take my word. And he's going soon to COP27, which is a conference of parties. It's a climate conference every year in Egypt, and he's going there, I think, for the second or third time. So anyway, I have the pleasure of having John come up and talk to us a little bit today. So, John.
Good morning. It's a privilege talking to you. I feel like I'm in Mecca for climate awareness. I think Unitarians are a league ahead of any faith group I've worked with nationally. So, for my personal sort of awakening, I have to blame Unitarians. 1964, University Unitarian Church in Seattle. I was 12, and up front was James Bevel and Marion Barry of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. They were then college students, young people, came clear across the U.S. from Selma to testify as to what was happening. Horrific stories about what I was pledging allegiance to every day. Something was profoundly missing. I'm happy to say that hundreds of wallets came out at the end of that sermon to fund the efforts back in Selma. And that led me, that was the opening to what I'm doing now, that sense that something is missing, that there's some fundamental injustice, that something deep and profound has to be corrected. So doing human rights work, supporting feminist causes, anti-poverty organizing, running a Native American group home, studying ecology, getting hit by the Club of Rome back in the 70s, living in environmental communities, each of those things gave me a different dimension of the emptiness, that something fundamental is missing. Something foundational was being harmed. And that led to the work here. You all are fantastic on climate justice. You've got a Green Sanctuary program, a Create Climate Justice Net, your DOVE program, demonstrating values through eating. Exemplary. Our Place in the Web of Life series is exemplary. You get it. And in many other faiths, there's a similar dynamic. With the Pope, we've got Laudato Si. But unfortunately, there's this big gap between the people with the ideas on top and the grassroots implementing. It's not happening. The traction isn't occurring. So my focus today is to talk a little bit about COP26 as it relates to us, because we're COP 2. We are a conference of the parties, the grassroots parties. So 3 questions. What is COP26? How did it go? And what can we do as people of faith here? So first of all, I only witnessed in Glasgow a tiny fraction of COP. It's way too big. At COP, our world is attempting to reconstitute itself. Attempting to meet as never before, attempting to listen as never before, attempting to agree as never before, and facing a peril greater than ever before. Climate change has no liberal or conservative, democratic or republican aspects. It's simply the laws of geophysics. So the Glasgow Congress was the 26th party that's happened for 26 years since Rio. And the goal is to create a convention, like the Geneva Convention, to understand climate change and to ensure climate justice. So there's 2 primary engines in COP. Number 1 is the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change. That's the science of what climate change is, how it harms, who is most vulnerable, how to adapt, what our future will be in 5 different projected scenarios. And the COP is trying to agree what to do about it. So IPCC is the scientist elected by the best of scientists. So the latest IPCC report is 3,900 pages long. It has about 14,000 peer-reviewed studies, and there's comments by every scientist on every line if there's any sort of qualification. So all IPCC reports are reduced into a policy synthesis doc and approved by all 195 countries. So, in a word, COP is an attempt at a global constitutional convention. How did it go? Well, the latest IPCC report can be reduced to 4 words spoken by Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Code red for humanity. Code red for humanity. It's getting worse faster than projected. The Paris Accords gave us a map to a difficult future. Many countries, particularly the US, are failing to keep our promises. If we act profoundly in the next few years, we can preserve the option of a difficult future for our children. If we do not, our children will face a dreadful future. So, what's the problem? It's not that all leaders are corrupt or incompetent. It is that there's a lot of avarice and greenwashing and all sorts of other things by moneyed interests. But the United States and the UK delegates I met after hours were really working their tails off. Kerry and others want us desperately to keep our promises. But Congress doesn't give them the support. Other countries face a similar problem. Of all the large developed democracies, the US has the least political support I've found to address climate change. That's where we come in. If we stepped up, dozens of countries would step up with us. Our commitment would literally make a world of difference. So, in the face of actual progress, side deals are cut to make the best possible face of progress and hopes for more progress in Egypt coming up in a few weeks. Not so good news. So what's the good news? Youth and faith groups like us got observer status. Some cities and companies and countries are making true progress. Scotland, for example, has reduced carbon expression by 30% in the past 5 years, where the US is going in the other direction. Even major oil companies like Norway have made substantial progress. In a nutshell, it's doable if the people are behind it. 3 countries are now carbon neutral. Other good news is that this lack of progress has created a very lively counterculture. There's a parallel people's cop that's feisty, argumentative, likes to get out there in the streets and confront. And in some ways, it's setting the value system for the main cop. It's people coming together, reconstituting from all over the world in seminars and a variety of other things. For example, they created a thing called the People's Hotel because it's very expensive to travel halfway around the world. And so 2,000 Glasgow households opened themselves up to host individuals who would come to do public action and charge next to nothing. Just the opportunity to host some way of bringing the world together. So, they also had university forums with alternatives, and then there was the 125,000 person march, which was sort of a testament to Scottish civility. All these people marching and no tear gas, no rubber bullets, no windows broken, and nobody yelling. People waving all the way down the 5-mile stretch. There was one protest group masquerading as communists that wanted to break windows. So what did the Scottish police do? They surround them and they say, "Pardon me, sir, would you step to the left? Pardon me, sir, would you step to the left? Pardon me, sir, would you step to the left?" And they took the whole group off and kettled them, and the march just went by. So that's a form of technology that we tend to lack here, that we could bring back here. And I was very impressed. So the COP is also becoming a climate pilgrimage, a climate Camino. Hundreds walked hundreds of miles to Glasgow in prayer as a faith pilgrimage. Everywhere you turned, there were good people of every faith, race, and nation, showing the unity of commitment that eluded the official COP. How do we understand this? What the heck's going on? Why do we have this impasse? I'd suggest that the COP is a monumental mirror, forcing humanity to see itself as it truly is. Altruism, dancing with avarice, devotion, dancing with denial, hope, dancing with despair. This mirror forces us to face the hidden history of harms that make our standard of living possible. Our genocide, our colonialism, our slavery, our discriminations, our capitalisms, you name it. It is the polluters beginning to truly know the polluted, the privileged getting to know profoundly the harmed. This mirror shows a growing river of harm and death. And this time it can't be covered up, can't be defeated, can't be denied, can't be voted out of office because it's driven by the laws of physics. It's something that cannot be evaded. Those most willing to face the mirror and to do what science says we must do really are the youth. They aren't just talking faith values, they are living them. Their marches were studiously nonviolent, with the places of honor given to the least of these. And so I was on the front of the march, and the Climate for Africa and hundreds of indigenous leaders were all carefully held together, leading the least of these. Sounds like an ethic our faiths have. Obama came and pointedly praised youth in his speech, saying that he felt they could save the day. Many prominent officials nodded and agreed, but I made a point to talk with some of them in quiet places, and also conferred with Bill McKibben about them, and found we had a similar take, and that is that behind their immense achievements is a huge personal cost. High rates of depression, talking about burnout, utter incomprehension at how everything they do doesn't move the needle. They fight the difficult conclusion that their lives do not matter. Many that I spoke with, not all, have largely let go of their dreams of a normal life, of having a family, of really exploring the world in the way that we've been privileged to do. Because they know that if we don't keep CO2 below 1.5 by 2030, that normal life will be impossible, and we're already 90% there. They feel, in a nutshell, that they are on the Titanic. They know the icebergs are ahead, and their pleas to change course are indulged and ignored. They feel abandoned by our failure to act. They're angry that the adults who have the political power and the wealth to solve the problem look to youth to be the champions. We, the parental and grandparental generation, have not stood up to protect them. They feel like political orphans. To get press coverage, they must do protests and get arrested, and the convictions are forever on their resumes, crippling their lifetime earning capacity. As Greta Thunberg noted there, we haven't broken the blah, blah, blah barrier. And right now I'm part of the blah, blah, blah. But we'll get to something beyond that, hopefully. So I even found some wondering if giving up their lives would finally bring the needed attention, like the suicide immolation that ignited Arab Spring and the Buddhists immolating themselves in Vietnam. How to get the attention? The desperation is out there and it's profound. How do we wake up the world to the gravity of our peril? I found similar things at the Line 3 protest in Minnesota, trying to stop the pipeline that's pushing super toxic tar sands through the headwaters of the Mississippi. Mind you, not further down, but right through the headwaters. 300 faith leaders came from across the nation, and we were skillfully trained about how to get arrested and jailed and bailed and facing trial. And these trainers, these college kids, were the cream of the crop. They were tomorrow's leaders. They had all been arrested repeatedly. They made banners, had first aid all organized. They had their lawyers brief us, and their prep and their support was meticulous. More than one youth leader thanked me personally for being there. I asked one why, and she said, "It feels so lonely having to do this all ourselves. It feels so lonely having to do it all ourselves." That broke my heart. I was in tears. Some ancient words came to mind. Why have you forsaken me? So what can we do here in an American church to make that difference in the world? I asked that question of many. America is and the answers I got are as follows. Number one, America is intensely watched as a bellwether of where the world is going, one way or the other. Many see us as unable to make up our minds. Are we promise makers or are we promise breakers? The world at Glasgow is damn hungry for any Americans to publicly commit to climate change and keep their promises. So a small group of Americans can do a big thing. So, four possible things. Number one, we own Code Red for Humanity. We publicly declare a climate emergency. Some cities and congregations are moving in this direction. Half of you, I gather, or 17 of you have signed up for the Climate Smart Bainbridge. That is a salient thing. Bainbridge Island has an opportunity to set the example for the world in terms of the degree of public coming together. Because as we come together, we make political power. We make a political example. We will get coverage. Other cities will emulate us. So, next is the Creation Justice Pledge, right out here. And so what I did in creating this, if it's in your program, turn to it, please. The idea here is, if our nation cannot commit, why do not we as a nation of believers commit to the Paris Accords? We can commit as a congregation to the Paris Accords. We can commit as an individual to the Paris Accords. We can undertake the things that countries fear doing and, frankly, shame them into doing, if you will. So, number one is I agree that we have a climate emergency. It's an individual pledge and a pledge to determine carbon footprint, and we already have an engine for doing that on Bainbridge. Number two is to do the same thing congregationally. That there's an emergency. We're admitting it. We're standing up and saying this is real, and we're doing so publicly, and cooperate with other religious organizations to mitigate the harm. Three, I pledge to support my congregation with another congregation harmed by climate change. Three is really important because it has to do with the doctrine of loss and damage. The Egypt COP is all about the Western wealthy countries dodging responsibility for the loss and damage that carbon expression has created. The US is not signing on. Canada is not signing on. All sorts of different countries aren't signing on because they're afraid of legal liability. But we can do what they refuse to do in macro, in micro. So I'm working with other churches, and we're doing a thing called Sister Climate Congregations, where we pair up one congregation here with one in Africa, one that's being victimized by climate change and one that's benefited from fossil fuel expression, like ourselves. And so I can link you with other congregations too, but then the idea is if one church links with another church, just one, then you get to know what it's going to be like up here in 4 or 5 years. If I'm moving down to Cape Town, they've already had severe droughts. They've hit 0 day. They've had to cut their water use by 50 or 60%. They're having huge floods and so on and so forth. But so there's an opportunity for us to pair. And as hundreds, if not thousands, of different congregations pair together, twin, if you will, that creates a very interesting dynamic where we're showing that we are able to own our actions. We're able to say we can do loss and damage, and then that creates a national pressure for doing so. Fourth is to be educated. And there's wonderful speaking earlier on Al Gore's pledge, or Al Gore's program, that can be taken virtually. 5 is to learn how to do effective letters and op-eds through the Third Act. And Third Act, you may not know, but it's coming out here in the Northwest, and it's organizing all people over 60 to do concerted, specific climate action and democracy preservation. And the beauty of the cohort over 60 is that they have 70% of the assets outside of corporations in the US. So if we decide to move out of banks that do fossil fuel and do it nationally, you can have a huge effect. And I don't mind getting arrested because they're not going to take away my job. My future earning capacity as a 70-plus person is pretty limited. 6, we pledge to support youth and other climate activists. 7, we pledge to create a curriculum that teaches the need to care for creation, to have our kids growing up knowing that the most sacred thing is the very earth in front of us. It's from whence we came and whence we will return. 8, to stop using banks that provide major funding. So that's an example, just that engine of a pledge. It could be 6 months after your normal financial pledge, like an Earth Month or April. And I can say that since drafting it a year ago, a part of the Islamic community, the Chicago Green Muslims have adopted it, that the Olympia Diocese of the Episcopal Church is considering it, that they're considering it in South Africa, so that's got some provenance, but here is where we could maybe do the best and most profound implementation. So, this pledge to understand creation crisis isn't something that's technical. We don't have to do a solitary study of atmospheric science. All we have to do is to attend to the reality that's around us and gather with our youth and others to work our way forward, and perhaps collectively within this group, 2 or 3 delegations could do the Al Gore training. It takes 3 days, it can be done online. It's really fun. And you end up with all this encouragement. You'll be meeting 17 to 20,000 people now trained globally, and there's an increasing number of seniors that are stepping out and saying, I'm not going to retire, I'm going to retire into climate. I'm going to retire into addressing the needs of my kids and my grandkids. I don't want my golf game, I want this game. So, the pledge models the Paris Accord by cutting our footprint by 50% by 2030. And so how is this about our faith? What many see as a political failure at COP, I see as a beloved community trying to rise from the ashes of our past actions. This beloved community desperately needs help. It can't rise there until we rise here. We don't have to change the world, we just have to change it here. That's feasible, that's local, and that could be a lot of fun. If this feels overwhelming, then it means we have to step through that door together. Together we can face this, and frankly, it feels great when you have, because we are so blessed with talent, wisdom, devotion, and capacity. If it can't happen here, it can't happen. And it can happen here, because we have a strong Creator, and we are the children of a strong Creator. This altar is not simply a podium, it's an altar of alteration. We're here for transformation. I'm not asking you to join me. That's not the path. The path is joining you in the deepest part of your heart that says yes. As Robin Wall Kimmerer wrote, knowing you love the earth changes you, activates you to defend, protect, and celebrate. But when you feel the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms the relationship from a one-way street to a sacred bond. That's where we get to meet. That's part of that missing thing that all of us can find that will galvanize all of us. So it's about acting right here, right now. All the powerful love you need is within you, beside you, waiting above you and below you. Take a breath to feel it. If we do this, will we lose parishioners? I don't find that's the case, not if there's love. If there's love, I think you'll find people who will feel the fear you face so fully and flock to Cedars. The most sadly political thing we can do is to let our hearts be filled with fear. Courage is fear that has said its prayers. And you, each of you, are mighty in your capacity to know. You're mighty in your capacity to grow. This doesn't take specialized scientific knowledge to understand. You sure don't have to be a lawyer, for God's sakes, because this is about homemaking. Homemaking in our faith, homemaking in our hearts, homemaking in our homes. Here, we can do this. Yes, we can. Thank you.
So, John, I want to thank you for retiring into climate change. That is a remarkable set of activities you are pursuing, and I think we wish you well in Cairo. Yes. So, now we are going to engage in our own discussions, and the topic is, what do we feel called to do? So, our assumption, which I think holds, is that everyone here recognizes that climate change is a major threat. And it calls for action, and our discussion will be about what we are called to do. So in this discussion, you could mention something you have already done, big or small, or something that you plan to do, big or small. It all counts. So what I want you to do is rearrange your chairs in groups of 3 or 4, and I highly recommend that partners separate. That way, no one can contradict you. So if you will take your chairs, and children, you're going to go with Archer. Okay? That's the guy over here. You know that. Right. Okay, so rearrange your chairs, not with your partner, and then we'll embark on these little discussions about our own personal response to climate change. Thank you. Okay, I recommend, thank you all. I notice the number of groups are larger than I recommended, which means you have less time. But I recommend going around in a circle and just letting each person speak, maybe for 3 minutes, about what they are called to do. So just go for it. Okay, folks, I know you're having a great time, but I am here to end your fun. Okay? So thank you for all the lively conversations. It's wonderful to see people so incredibly engaged, and I know you've shared a ton that you are doing. So thank you for that. You can bring your chairs back, and let me turn this back over to John, or to Mike.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Fran, for leading that. So, So we're gonna close here, extinguish. Then John's gonna give a quick benediction, and then we'll let you go for the day. So, and the sun's out. Yikes! Jeez, it's nice. So if everybody will please repeat after me, this is our extinguishing the flame of the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth. The warmth of community or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And again, I want to thank everybody, John and Sandy and Fran, for this great service. So thank you. John?
As a Unitarian kid, I kept looking for the Bible, and I could only find it in the library. As an adult, I realized that the first Bible is unwritten. If we open our hands, the first Bible is creation. It's the air against us, the water, the sky, the elements. Chief Seattle said that the earth doesn't belong to us, we belong to the earth. All things are connected like the blood that unites us all. Man didn't weave the web of life, he's merely a strand of it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. And Schweitzer said, Albert Schweitzer, you'll never find true happiness till you determine how it is you are to serve. Thank you.
That's our service for the day. If you want to hang around and some coffee, but thank you everybody for coming.